Good morning, welcome everybody to this last session of our Tuesday seminar series for the year 2020. Today we have the pleasure to have with us Alberta Giorgi from the University of Bergamo. She is assistant professor at the University of Bergamo. She worked at the Center for Social Studies at the University of Coimbra and collaborated with the Hellenic Foundation for European and Foreign Policy for the ERC-funded project Grassroots Mobilize. And she held visiting positions at Chevy Paul Brussels and GSRL Paris. She works on the intersections of religion and politics, namely secularism, gender, and religion. Again, thanks very much, Alberta, for being with us, and I leave you the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mattia, and thank you everybody for being here, of course. And yeah, I'm trying to, sharing my screen. Okay, great. And yeah, thank you for this invitation specifically. Okay, are you seeing my screen, right, at this moment?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, great, fantastic. Well, okay, so again, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really glad to be here and to be discussing with you this work in progress. As you can see, I slightly changed the title. This is what we always do during the presentations. So now that the title is Hijack or Release on the heuristic limits of the frame of instrumentalization of religion for discussing the entanglements of populism, religion, and gender. So this is the outline. First of all, I will, reintroduce myself, basically to explain what's my take on religion and politics, and specifically on populism, religion, and gender. So then I will explain the issue, present the case study, and open the floor for the discussion. So this is my background. Basically, I work at the intersections between political sociology and the sociology of culture. So basically, my my perspective and my approach is cross-fertilized by these two different research fields. So as for political sociology, I worked in the past on the political debates on religion-related issues, especially when I was in Portugal. I worked on the judicialization of politics and religion, especially during the ERC-funded project Grassroots Mobilize, during which I met Marco Ventura, for example, among many other colleagues. And I worked previously on political participation. And right now, I'm the vice chair of political sociology of the research network of political sociology for the European Sociological Association, and I'm co-chairing together with Manuela Caiani the standing group of Partecipazione Politica e Movimenti Sociali for the Italian Society of Political Science. So this is my background in political sociology. On the other side, I am a sociologist of culture, so I specifically work from a socio-constructivist perspective to understand what are the meanings and the understandings of specific concept and religion, mostly, in the public sphere and in the political debate. And for that, I work on women, LGBT plus person, gender issues, on the concepts of post-agency and religion and feminism. And I serve in the board of Sociology of Religion for the Italian Association of Sociology. I'm saying that to specifically explain that my specific understanding of populism and religion and gender is based on the interest towards what people say that populism is and what people understand of the intersections between gender, politics, and religion. So this project that I will be presenting today is, stems from a workshop held last year in Bergamo, titled Populism, Gender and Religion, Tensions and Entanglements. So you probably had the chance of, at least seeing the paper, which is currently under revision for identities is well, okay, it's for a special issue that Christian Rochelle and myself are coordinating on these topics. And the other project stemming from that workshop is a book project on populism and science, and specifically on populism as well as promoting a specific theory of knowledge. I'm telling you that because I just got the news that we will be actually publishing this book. So yeah, I'm very happy. So populism, gender, and religion. Basically, you see, Saving the People is one of the first systematic collection on populism and religion. And as you can see, the subtitle is How Populists Hijack Religion. And hijack, this concept of hijacking, is specifically what I'm tackling today. And on the other side, you can see one of the last books on populism and gender, right-wing populism and gender, which is another interesting and growing research field. Not always these two research fields cross-fertilize and speak together. So what we know about populism and religion, I will start with what we know from the literature on populism and religion. So we know, well, populism and religion has been studied in different ways. Some scholars speak of religious populism, so as religious populism as a specific subtype of populism. Other consider politics of salvation, so other considers basically the discursive rhetoric and style of populism, comparing that to the religious specific discourse. So basically, considering populism and religion, and considering the mostly the ideational approach, so the idea of populism as a thin center ideology, we know that religion can work as a dispositive of othering identity or othering and identity. So basically, in the discourse of populist actors, religion can be what define the others, so Muslim as the others, or religion can be what define the us, so we are Christians, or can be both. We are Christians and they are Muslims. Not always these two elements go together. Religion in the populist discourse, we know that is considered mostly as a culture, heritage. That's why the symbols and the materiality of symbols is particularly relevant. Religion is considered as a nation in terms of tradition, not as a faith, or not specifically as a faith. There is a large debate, there is a growing understanding and a growing field of study in the culturalization of religion, not always and not only in relation to populism, but the specific understanding or the specific role of religion in the populist discourse is specifically related to culture. We also know that populist leaders often criticize religious leaders, and this happens especially with regard to the Catholic Church. On the demand side, however, we know that, well, populist actors and specifically populist parties and movements are related or are supported or have connections with conservative religiously inspired movement. However, we know also that hierarchies and religious institutions criticize populist leaders. And considering the electoral studies, we also know that regular churchgoers are less likely to vote for extremist parties. So that's what we know about populism and religion in the literature. On the other side, on the other hand, on populism and gender, we know that the populist discourse gender the others and sexual minorities, so target LGBT plus groups, for example, or rights, so gender can be used as a dispositive of othering. We also know that gender has been used, or gender equality, gender rights, are used also as a dispositive of identity to define what we are, what Europe is, with respect to the barbarian others. So we know the femo-nationalist discourse or the homo-nationalist discourse promoting or valuing gender rights against the barbarian others. Then we know that there are different performances of masculinity among the populist actors, and we also have a lot of studies on the outcomes or the policies related to gender put in place by populists in powers. We know that on the demand side, electoral studies show us that women are less likely to vote for far-right populist parties, although this is different in different countries. So this is an open field of studies. We also know about what has been called homo-nationalist vote, especially in some European countries. And there are mixed findings regarding the relationship between attitudes towards gender equality and the support to far-right political parties. Then we know that, well, there are women's and LGBT plus groups supporting populist actors, but the overwhelming majority is against. And I reported here the title of a particularly interesting workshop and conference of last week discussing specifically these topics. When we consider the entanglements of populism, religion, and gender, however, we usually see studies focusing on the masculinity of the religious other and how LGBT persons and women's rights, as I was saying, are used or are presented in the populist discourse as something which is different from the religious other. So gender equality is represented as opposed to the Muslim other. And this reenacts basically the colonial discourse, as John Wallach Scott demonstrated, and she shows the genealogy of this kind of understanding of the entanglements of populist gender and religion in the colonial discourse. Okay, so basically all these studies, or usually when we consider the populist discourse, we scholars say that populist actors operate in hijacking of religion and instrumentalization of religious values, of religious idea, and of gender-related issues. It's an exploitation for political gain. So basically, we are saying that we are contesting that political leaders are not true believers. So they are exploiting religion. They are not true believers. They do not support really, totally, gender equality or religion. Also, in saying that, in adopting the instrumentalization frame, so in saying that populist leaders instrumentalize this value, we also somehow have or can have paternalistic assumptions about people's true interests. And we are saying, well, religious people shouldn't be voting for populist parties because populist parties are not truly supporting religious values. So we are basically superimposing an understanding of people's true interests and what they should be doing. So we conceptualize usually, I mean, in many studies, we conceptualize the support towards populist parties as something which is somehow contradictory. If people are religious people, then they shouldn't be voting for these parties. And the third issue could be the idea that if we are living in a secularized Europe, so if we are living in a Europe in which citizens are less and less interested in the church and in religion, why exactly should populist actors appeal to religious value? What they want to obtain if religious people or religiously interested people are diminishing? So what I am arguing in the paper, what I'm arguing in this study, is that what are the ideas regarding religion, and specifically regarding the entanglements of religion and gender amongst the supporters of populist parties. Because it may be an instrumentalization, but it doesn't feel like that for them. So, well, my case study is specifically related to Italy and to the Lega Nord. I won't be, of course, detailing to you the Italian context, because you are all familiar with that. And also, I'm just saying that, of course, there is a diminishing in the church attendance in Italy, although Catholicism can be defined as a vicarious religion, so it's practiced by a minority, but it's important to a majority. Also, I'm not detailing the Lega Nord approach to religion. You will know that there was a first phase in which there was an idea, sort of a pagan religion related to the Po River, and the second phase in which the opposition amongst Christianity and Islam gained importance in the Lega Nord discourse. I'm only reporting these studies related to the gender dimension or the gender discourse of the Lega Nord from the studies by Francesca Scrinzi, Sara Farris, and Elisa Bellet, for example. They all pointed out the heterosexual normativity in the Lega Nord discourse, the understanding of women as both warriors and mothers of the nation, and the presence of racialized sexism. So my methodology, well, first of all, in terms of concepts, I'm using the concept of thin ideology, particularly because this is a collective project. So we have all, and that's why I spoke about the special issue, because we all decided to engage with the concept of thin ideology. So I'm using that concept, although I'm also considering the relevance of culture in the discourse. And I'm referring to the Lega Nord by using the classification of the populist. I'm focusing on Instagram basically because previous studies have shown how the reference to religion in the discourse of the Lega Nord is more present in the social media discourse rather than in their political manifesto. So I'm focusing on the social media and then specifically on Instagram. And I collected religion-related posts by Matteo Salvini, and then I randomly selected comments to these posts to understand what exactly supporters or commentators, because they are not only supporters commenting on Matteo Salvini's post, say about religion and gender. I adopted the text-driven coding, and for a qualitative analysis, I was interested not specifically in the percentages, but I was interested in understanding the range of framing of these topics. And of course, there are some percentages, but this is specifically because I first of all classified the religion-related posts posted by Salvini or his social media manager between May 2019 and August 2020. May 2019 is the well, of course, the conclusion of the political campaign for the European election, and so it was important because there was the scene of Salvini showing and kissing the rosary for the first time. It had a huge echo, so that's why I've chosen that starting point. Okay, so this is the classification of the religion-related posts uploaded or posted by Salvini in his Instagram page. And as you can see, there are, well, there is a small percentage of posts related to Islam, although it's interesting to say that it's only related to Islam, no other religions are mentioned. So I mean, no Sikhs, no Protestant churches, no evangelicals, only Islam is relevant to this discourse. The most populated category is this one, so symbols and prayers, and basically these are posts inviting to pray or inviting to praise God or to praise Virgin Mary, for example. Then we have posts saving traditions or condemning blasphemies, and these are posts related, for example, to the denunciations of what Salvini called blasphemies. So, for example, not representing nativity scenes in primary schools, for example, or this kind of things. This is, I think, religious actors in favor or against the Lega Nord. I think this is the most interesting category because basically it is quite populated, so 27% of posts are related to this category. And it's interesting because basically these posts report interviews or newspapers articles in which either religious actors, meaning exponents of the clergy, criticize the Lega Nord and, for example, say you can't vote for the Lega Nord and being a Christian or being a Catholic, or interviews in which exponents of the clergy express positions that can be resonant with the Lega Nord position. And I selected specifically these the comments related to these posts because of course here we can see what supporters say about being instrumentalized or not. So basically, my argument is this: the supporters of Salvini and of the Lega Nord do not think they are instrumentalized. And especially because they say that the Catholic Church does not represent religion. And they unpacked, this main argument can be unpacked in 4 different sub-arguments. And what I'm saying is that these elements supporting the idea that the Catholic Church does not represent religion are not specifically related to the supporters of Salvini, but they basically they are interconnected to what's happening in the field of religion. So the religious discourse of the Lega Nord is appealing because it is resonant with what's happening also in the Catholic field and in the religious field. So in the comments, what I will be showing now are how the comments of the supporters of Salvini are basically really repeating or showing what's happening in the broader field of religion. First of all, the culturalization of religion. So, for example, the comments of Salvini's supporters say, for example, I'm first of all Christian and then maybe Catholic. They speak about spreading our Christian science. The comments express religiosity as an identity sign, as something that characterizes a local community, not the global community of faith, but a local community related to specific traditions. And this, of course, downplayed the role of Catholic Church in Christianity or in Catholicism, because it's not the Catholic Church that is important, but are the traditions that are important. And again, this is resonant with what's happening, I mentioned that before, with what's happening in the broader field of religion. There are many studies showing the culturalization of religion, how religion can be considered also as culture. Of course, religion is culture also. I mean, it's not only faith. Still, it is relevant to show how this culturalization of religion has a role in explaining the appealing of the religious discourse of the Lega Nord. And also this is particularly interesting, this comment, because it operates a difference between Christianity and Catholicism. So Catholicism could be interpreted as religion, but Christianity is a broader culture. And there are many comments like that. So I'm first of all Christian and then maybe Catholic. The second point is related to the individual religiosity versus religious institution. And again, we can see that the supporters or those who comment the posts uploaded by Salvini say that, well, they are really Catholic. They are they identify themselves as Catholic, but their self-identification is not related or is independent from what the religious institution say. So, for example, this is an interesting comment. This is commenting a post reporting an interview by one exponent of the clergy saying, well, if you vote for the Lega Nord, you can't be Catholic. And the comment says, who are you to say this? I vote Lega and I'm much more Christian than you are. And this is interesting because this is related to a detachment and the autonomization of the faithful from institutional religious authority. And again, this is something that scholars of sociology of religion has been saying for a long time. The personalization in the forms of religious expression, or all these expressions, believing without belonging, patchwork religion, religious bricolage, religion à la carte, all speak about a personalization of religion. Also, more recent studies focusing on religion in digital environments. I'm not using the mediatization concept because, of course, it's really contested now. So I'm focusing on the religion in digital environments. These studies show the transformation of religious authority and the contestation of religious authority and the personalization of religion and the forms of expression of religiosity by the faithful. So the third point is the change in religious authority. We can unpack the concept of religious authority. I mean, there are different ways of doing that, but for example, by adopting Campbell's classification, and she says that religious authority can be considered in terms of hierarchy, so specific figures who are relevant, or in terms of structure, the church, or in terms of ideology, what religion says, or in terms of texts. So religious authority can be derived from religious texts. As you can see from these comments, there is a criticism toward religious structure and the idea that religious authority is not related primarily to the structure, but is related primarily to other elements, so ideology or maybe text that can be approached directly without the mediation of the structure. So you can see, for example, these kind of comments: the true Catholics are absolutely with Salvini. Matteo represents the true Catholics. The Pope is a slave to the globalists. This Pope is, of course, the current Pope is particularly criticized by the supporters of Salvini. This comment is particularly interesting too. It says, the church is not yours, you work there. And this is, of course, addressed to a priest. The church belongs to the people, and I go in and out whenever I want. If you disagree, you go away, not us. And this is, again, this is interesting, because this is the idea is that a religion does not belong to the structure. It's not related to a religious hierarchy, but it's something that belongs to the people. It's, of course, a populist understanding of religion. Fourth, this is specifically related to what's happening in the Catholic field. The comments criticizing the Catholic Church and the positions of the Catholic Church rely specifically on criticizing, on shaming the behaviors of the clergy, on exposing the fact that the clergy is not behaving by God's word, and that's why we can't trust the church. This is the idea is that the epistemic authority of the Catholic Church is related to the personal credibility of the priests. And again, this is something that scholars working on the changes in the regimes of truth within the Catholic Church has been saying for a long time, that there is a change, there is a rising importance of the regime of testimony within the Catholic Church. So basically, my idea here is to say that if we use the concept of instrumentalization, we overlook the fact that there are changes within Catholicism that can help us explaining the appeal of the religious discourse of the Lega Nord amongst the citizens, among the people who consider themselves religious and who consider themselves Catholic, but who is in disagreement with the Catholic Church. Still, they are, they can be considered Catholic. I mean, they consider themselves Catholic. And if we use the idea of instrumentalization, we are saying either that they are not Catholic, or they don't understand what's happening. So I'm saying that maybe we could be looking at something slightly different here. I think it's interesting, again, focusing on this. And what about religion and gender? Well, basically the findings confirm what's already in the literature. So Muslim men are depicted as authoritarian, with respect to women and children, and they are depicted as integralist with respect to LGBT plus rights or women's rights. So you can see here the comments to these specific posts saying that, questioning the religiosity of the one holding the placard. Muslim women, on the other hand, again, as it has been shown by different studies, Muslim women are depicted as either victim of Muslim men, or depicted as reproducers of an alien nation and an alien culture, so allied with the Muslim men, but then otherized and racialized and otherized. So, for example, commenting on this post in which allegedly a physician was fired or risked to be fired because he asked to a Muslim woman of putting away the veil, the comments said, well, a man cannot force a woman to cover herself from head to toe, you primitive. This is quite interesting, of course. But it emerged a third way, a third entanglement of religion and gender in the discourse of the supporters. And this is the questioning of the masculinity of the priests, and specifically of the priests supporting or aiding migrants, to undermine their discourse and their position. So basically, they can't be trusted because they are not true. They are not true men. They are not. They do not adhere to the masculinity model. So, because of this, they can't be trusted. Because of this, well, their masculinity and their virility is put under question. And this is another entanglement of religion and gender. This is quite interesting because, of course, the idea is that this priest, the sexuality of the priest is a problem specifically. Not because there is a sexuality, because, for example, there are no mention of the violence against the nuns, for example, but the problem is that it's not heterosexual. And of course, there is the question of pedophilia. So what I wanted to say that, first of all, well, in terms of the conceptualization of populism, religion and gender overlaps in the construction of the cultural other. So this specific form of the populist discourse connects these two elements. Well, first of all, this calls for intersectional analysis, but also it's, well, maybe, that's a question, that's an open question. It also has, it is a bit difficult to adopt the thin ideology in this context. Second, and mostly, yeah, I wanted to say that, so the idea that we can improve our understanding of the relationship between religion and populism by nuancing the idea of hijacking or instrumentalization, and taking into account the relevance of cultural religiosity, of cultural Catholicism. We see, for example, in electoral studies, in recent electoral studies, working on the supporters of populist parties, that sure, regular churchgoers do not support populist parties, but though irregular churchgoers do. So there is a connection between being a cultural Catholic and supporting populist parties. And so it's important and it's relevant to take into account what's happening in the religious field to better understand what's happening in the political field. This, of course, came from my specific understanding of the relationship between politics and religion. And yeah, that's basically what I want to say. So thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much, Alberta, for this presentation full of interesting points, ready to be picked up by our audience. So I'm happy to open the floor for discussion and for questions.
Mattia, there are a couple of persons that have raised their hands. Marco and Linda.
Sorry, I didn't see it. Oh, I'm sorry. So Linda and Rossella. So in this order.
And
please.
Also Marco Ventura.
Okay. Linda, then Rossella, and then Marco.
Linda, the microphone.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. It was really insightful, and especially I liked a lot the point that populism is not about the link between populism and religion is not about instrumentalization, but maybe, if I can rephrase it, exploitation of attention that is within the Catholic Church. My question is maybe mostly a curiosity, whether my feeling as an observer is right or not. And my feeling is that I think that in the 90s, there was a period in which Catholic Church has undergone a period of innovation, which also meant dialogue with other cultures, especially I felt especially in my context where I grew up, a sort of challenging of the pagan symbols which were often attached to the Catholic Church. So, for example, let's go to the renewed Christian spirit and so on. At the same time, this renewal has challenged some traditions which were important, especially in some rural contexts, and so on and so forth. This has created a tension that again, in my observation, emerged especially in the 2000s, especially when Islam started to become a threat rather than a religion to which one to dialogue. And I think that the tension became even more, let's say, even harsher after the, let's say, the period of Ratzinger, and now this dualism, let's say, between the old Pope and the new Pope. It is an oversimplification to say that nowadays there is a Catholicism of left and another one of right. I don't think it is exactly the right thing, but I think there is a Catholicism more prone to dialogue, to, let's say, to grassroots, to genuine Christianity, and another one which is more traditional. And I think populists were quite clever in being able to exploit that traditional Catholicism that appealed to rural people, low educated, let's say, which feel religion as a part of their identity, their community, what defines them as their identity, which is threatened by other cultures, other ideas which were emerging in the last decade. So this is just a curiosity if my observation is correct or not.
Thank you, Linda. We have Rossella.
Ciao. Thank you. It was really interesting. And I just wanted to ask, you stick to Mood's ideational approach in your presentation, in your study. So the thin ideology that constructs society as divided into two groups, us and them, the pure people, the elite. But then in your analysis, you say that religion and gender are functional construction of the us and them. So in that they contribute to reinforce the in-group, and they are to the strategy of othering that is essential in the populist rhetoric. But it seems to me that if your idea may be the definition of populism is your theoretical framework to your framework of analysis. In that, and above all, I'm thinking to the definition of De La Torre, but I think this about populism as a rhetorical frame, as a framing strategy, and in that religion is instrumental to their goals, to the construction of the them and the us. That's it.
Thank you, Rossella. I have another raised hand by Francesca, so I will collect Francesca's question, and then maybe we end this first round, and we give you, Alberta, a chance to reply. Okay.
Or perhaps Alberta wanted to reply now. I saw.
No, there was also Marco.
Okay, Marco.
Then Marco, perhaps go ahead.
Actually not. I'm always happy to.
Okay, because I didn't see your raised hand. Pierangelo, but okay.
Yeah, you go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, then I go very quickly, and thank you as well. I joined the seminar and was very happy to have the occasion to follow that. And I mean, I have a question for Alberta, or perhaps more an invitation to kind of common brainstorming. As you know, I'm much more focused on the gender dimension of this relationship, but still I think theoretically, I mean, they are very close, as you conclude in your slides. I also think that is very, especially in our context, in Italian context, or in context that has a very high cultural religiosity, it's very, it's very important to look at the two things together. And so my question was exactly related. I would like to know your opinion about what we can do. As you said, I think, and you are right in that, and also in the direction of what Rossella was saying, perhaps Moodian approach doesn't really help us in understanding exactly this type of entanglements, because whenever we talk about both gender and religion, we are basically making reference to what are really embedded cultural and dimensions of people identities. And the two of them are also super entanglement. When we say that we live in gendered society, this is obviously also connected to the type of religious context in which this society are, thriving and developing. And so my question would be how can we instead try to find theoretically speaking, so what is a framework, a theory, or perhaps a direction that we can start develop and where we can go. And perhaps, I mean, my idea, and I think you know this, is the idea of trying to understand. I mean, I also come from a Moodian front, let's say, but the more I get into that, the more I'm unhappy with this. But perhaps would be also the idea of using both populism and, in our case, religion and gender as signifiers, which is, of course, the Laclavian approach. But I really think that, in a way, the idea of how these concepts are then used by the demand side, because of course for the supply side, the discussion on how populist actors use this type of concept is a different issue. But the idea of using and analyzing this concept from as signifiers, so how they are basically filled with meanings, and in a way as well how they kind of are filled with the commonsensical and the common sense of the people, and how they can basically speak about identities that people really perceived, could be a good way to go about it. I don't know whether, I mean, it's just a suggestion. I would like to, generate a little bit of a debate, and I think it could be something interesting to reflect on. And the question more broadly, instead, also based on your work, but also the special issue that will be out soon, hopefully. I was wondering whether actually you have seen some kind of varieties as well on how these two, also the role and the interplay between religion and populism in society that are less religious or culturally religious as ours. So what about, the northern countries, and what about, I don't know, it's Scandinavian, so in societies that are even more secularized than ours, if there is any variation in the way in which this like connection is made. Sorry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francesca. Alberta, you received quite a lot of questions and comments, so let us know what you think.
Yes, well, first of all, thank you very much, because it's, well, these are nice, challenging, and interesting questions. I will start with Rossella and Francesca's question, because I think they are quite related, of course. I do agree with you both in the idea that that's exactly what happened. So I started by trying to apply Mude's concept, but then I think it's insufficient, I think, in explaining, or to our understanding, to what's specifically happening. And yes, Mude and De La Torre's idea of framing strategy, and broadly the Laclau, the approach by Laclau, they are also more close to what I've been doing, and I think they can work better, especially for understanding what's happening in the public discourse, and not only in the discourse promoted by leaders or parties, especially, of course, because I come from that tradition, of course, Mouffe and Laclau's tradition of analyzing the contestations and negotiations of concepts. So I think that this could be particularly interesting. Also, not only to understand what populism is, or how, not only to understand the idea of religion, but also to understand how populism itself is perceived and represented and framed. So yeah, I totally agree with you both. And connecting the second point of Francesca's question with Linda's question, yes, I was speaking about what's happening broadly in Christianity, which has, of course, different actualization in different countries, and first of all in different Christian countries. And of course, what's happening in Christianity is not what's happening in other religions. So I do agree. I agree with you, Linda, in relation to what's happening in Italy. So the idea that there was an opening in the 90s, and the tension developed between the specific type of Catholicism more related to tradition, and another type of Catholicism more open, and we can say also more international or globalized. Also, I think, however, that Catholicism is really multifaceted. So it's difficult to say that there are only, let's say, these two strands. What's happening also, or what I see, or what others have seen, is that there is a fragmentation of Catholicism. Well, first of all, in Italy, we do have different traditions of Catholicism. So the Catholicism in the southern part of Italy is not the Catholicism of the northeast, and it's not the Catholicism of the center of Siena, for example. So, I mean, there are different traditions and political cultures also of Catholicism. So, and that's the first point. And then second, these political cultures and these traditions of Catholicism are also related to different groups and organizations. So we can see what's happening to the church structure, but we also see the rising of, well, Catholic groups and movements, both within and outside the Catholic Church. So in the Catholic Church, the movements are really relevant now. And outside of the Catholic Church, there are groups speaking for or on behalf of Catholicism. There are contestations to the extent to which they can be considered as Catholic. And so, I mean, but I guess what I want to say is that there is a fragmentation. So there are different really positions, really nuanced positions, and I would say that there are not only the, let's say, left and right position or traditional and progressive tradition, but there are, yeah, different entanglements on that. But then, I mean, I do agree, and these tensions with the new, I don't think that the new Pope and the old Pope are different in what they say. I think, however, that they are different in the optics and in the perception, the public perception. I mean, for example, for gender, Ratzinger and the current Pope has basically really similar positions. So in terms of also of practices, I mean, I know that it can be controversial as an affirmation, but I also think that it's true. And about varieties, well, in the northern countries, I see that it's quite similar, because the idea is that cultural Christianity plays a role in the religious discourse of political actors and of populist actors in particular. So actually there is an appeal specifically on this type of cultural Christianity, and we know that northern countries are much more secularized, if we consider secularization as diminishing of church attendance, of course. So they are much more secularized. On the other hand, we see different use of different entanglements between religion and politics in different countries. For example, we have an article on India, and that's quite interesting to see what's happening in India with religion and politics. And also, of course, well, the very concept of religious populism, the first use of religious populism has been used for Islam, for example, and for Iran revolution. So, yeah, there are different entanglements in relation to that.
Thank you, Alberta. I have a raised hand from Rossella, I think, for a quick follow-up comment. Then Paolo after Rossella.
Thank you, Alberta. I just wanted to add that I was referring to the Latour definition, which is one of the many definitions of the as a discursive strategy, because it brings in a concept be useful for the purpose of your research, which is morality, as it sees populism as a construction of politics in a moral and ethical struggle between the two groups, the us and the them, the people and the elite. And I think that it can be a broad framework of analysis, including, for example, you mentioned what's happening in India and in other populist settings, for example. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rossella. Paolo?
Yes, Alberta, thanks a lot for your very, very interesting presentation. And I understand that your research program is large, is vast. And then today you presented us as a case study on the Northern League. And my reflections, my questions are more on the Northern League and then on the larger picture of the relationship between gender, religiosity, and politics. I was a little bit surprised when talking about populism and Northern League. All the data you should, all the posts, the comments, and also that you showed us, they didn't show a thin ideology. They showed a strong right-wing ideology, and the relationship with religion and the authority, the religion authorities is just an indicator of this very strong ideology. So I'm not very sorely convinced that by your case study, and I understand this is just one one instance, and then there are other instances in other countries and for other parties. But to me, the idea that there is a link between populism and religion is weak, and is stronger the link between right-wing ideology and religion, and traditional religion. And then the second comment is that, in a way, I could, in terms of talking about the exploitation of religiosity, then my question was, I mean, months ago, how come that Salvini chose to present himself as such a strong religious leader? And then there was maybe an issue of, there was the problem of selecting a new national issue, because at the beginning the Northern League was based on against immigration, and then but was also for autonomy of the northern Italy. And then autonomy came down because it was trying to project a more national image. And then religion, and this kind of traditional religion, was maybe an easy unifying theme for the party, for the new leadership to project itself on the national stage. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paolo. I would also use my role of chair to give myself the floor for a short question, which is kind of related to what Paolo said, and it probably has more to do with how populist parties are classified today than with your research specifically. Because the first question that came to my mind while you were giving details about how religion is used by these parties was that my first question was the following: is this really about populist parties, or is it just about right-wing politics and right-wing parties? Then, of course, you go and check the official lists of populist parties, and basically all right-wing parties are populist, are considered populist today. So there is a complete, almost, I don't want to say complete, but almost complete overlap of right-wing parties and populist parties. So is the populist label any useful under these circumstances? Question mark. Thank you.
Okay, shall I answer, or because there was, I think, Francesca who wanted to say something about that? No, okay. Okay. Or not. Okay, well, yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, thank you, Rossella, first of all, for the clarification. Yes, also now I see your point, and I definitely agree. And again, this is connected to all of your questions. So thank you, Paolo, thank you, Mattia. Yes, I mean, there is a huge problem with the Moody's definition of thin ideology, and also with adopting the label of populism. And so the idea of saying, well, you know, probably you are looking more at right-wing parties and not specifically at populist parties, or what we can say, it's not exactly a thin ideology. And I completely agree. I mean, it's not a thin ideology. It's the use of religion and gender is really what constitutes the identity of this discourse. It's not thin. That's my point. And I think we all agree that using this concept of thin ideology is useful for comparison, and it's useful. It has been useful a lot. I don't think that it's specifically useful here, and that's why I specifically wanted to engage with this concept, because I wanted to see whether it can be adopted and it can be used for this. And also, Mattia, yeah, I see your point. There can be an overlapping, and basically, if you look at the populist So the classification I've been using, yes, basically all the right-wing parties are considered as populist. So either we say that populism, that we live in a populist democracy, or there is, we are looking at the populist public sphere, the populist political sphere, and we adopt that as a background. Or otherwise, it's difficult, basically. But I think also that the difficulty is also related to the so many different definitions that we have of populism, as we have been saying. If we use, there are so many different uses of populism, which also do not refer to actors. Or if you look at, I mean, if you use Moffitt's definition, for example, of the style and performance, or if you use exactly what we have been using now, or the Laclau's understanding of populism, it's not related to the actors, right? So it's more related to what I was saying, that we should be probably considering the specific configuration of the discourse in the political sphere now. So as a platform, let's say, and not as a character of the actors. So yeah, thank you for these comments. So I would say I don't know if I agree that it's not specifically useful for this case. I do think, however, that it's useful as a common language also to discuss. And I mean, I think that there is something there that we probably can use. And it also depends on what we are talking about. So, yeah. And connection, again, what Paolo said, yes, I agree that if you look for a reason, yes, religion is a unifying element for the constituency, for the electoral basis. Yes, there was immigration, and now there is religion, which can be a unified element. I do agree. What I'm saying is that it works as a unifying element because there is something happening that allows it to be used as a unifying element. Otherwise, it couldn't be used. And that, I think, is, well, it's important to say. Yeah, because otherwise you could have been using other elements. So it's my understanding, or at least my perspective, is that something is made relevant by its saliency, but its saliency should have some basis. Otherwise, it couldn't be, made salient.
Thank you, Alberta. Let me see if we can collect some more questions or comments. Francesca, please.
I don't know whether it's a question, it's just to also add something else to what Alberta said. And I honestly, I found, Alberta's replies as well, exactly to the point. I mean, the reason why we should be studying all of this is because, to try to explain why certain type of discourse really resonate, no? I mean, the whole point is to understand exactly not only why a political actor is using such and such in a strategic or whatever way. We know that, of course, political actors, leaders, political parties are also political entrepreneurs. And this also has to be taken into account whenever we look at the supply side. But then the reason why all these things really work, no? This construction, how this, rhetorical device actually impinge and make them successful, I think this should be also for this type of theme. So also for, should be the way to go and look at this entanglements between populist parties and religion, gender, and so on. I mean, I do agree, Mattia, as well, with the question, okay, everything is populist at the moment. That's true. I mean, there is an old debate. I don't want to defend the label of populism in and of itself. But I just would like to, you know, throw to the fore like a very, I mean, something that we have seen happening in the political arena, right? We all remember Giorgia Meloni 1 year and a half ago, whatever, like October 2019, in that famous like consensus or reunion of the center-left coalition, and that famous discourse that then became super viral, right, on the internet, YouTube. Then we had like pop song, no, whatever, like disco songs and so on. So she says, I'm Georgia, I'm a woman, I'm a mother, I'm a Catholic, I'm a Christian, blah, blah, blah. So all these, you know, basically like connections of identity, but then how she ended this discourse is, and you, naming the elites, you won't take this away from us. And this is the whole point. And this is exactly why, I mean, these connections and this type of discourse really resonate. And this is where all the form is populist, if I may. Of course, the content perhaps is not populist on and of itself, is conservative, is, you know, is a type of discourse that we have seen in many conservative actors, and it's definitely in this case and many others is a radical right and far right type of argumentation. But the way it is constructed is definitely populist. So I know that, I mean, then how we measure what, blah, 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 but still I think it's something that is relevant and should be not completely disregarded, because otherwise we just miss a little bits of what we are interested in understanding. Sorry for this, but I mean, I really care about this whole, like, this debate. So yeah, just to make also, you know, support what Alberta just said so far.
No problem. I want to clarify. I didn't mean to say that populism is necessarily not relevant. I was more inclined to say that it is about right-wing populists and only right-wing populists. I would be surprised to find this rhetoric in centrist or left-wing populism. So at least it should probably, I mean, the clarity of the definition would be higher if when we analyze these processes, we recognize that they live in the intersection between this populist thin ideology, which I'm not totally against, and the robust and strong right-wing ideology that these parties adopt. So it's probably right that most right-wing parties adopt a populist strategy nowadays, and it is not to say that they are not populist. It is to say that populism is mainly taking the form of right-wing populism nowadays. And but if we want to use the label populism, we have to distinguish between right-wing and left-wing. And so probably these, let's say, all these instruments have a lot to do with the right-wing ideology that is then exploited in a populist fashion. I think we can all agree on this.
Yes, definitely, we can all agree on it. But also, yeah. I wanted to comment on what you were saying just now. That yes, and if we consider that, we can also see or look at what the left-wing populism, if we want to call it like that, or non-partisan populism, has to do with religion. Again, I recently read a fantastic and quite interesting article, you know, looking at the religion and the Movimento 5 Stelle, which is not specifically using religion, right? And again, there are so many different ways of intersecting religion and the party discourse. That I agree that we should, sorry, I shouldn't have said it's right-wing populism, or better far right. I mean, in the populist, this is right-wing populism, right? So, and I agree that it's related not specifically to, yeah, what you say, not specifically to populism, but it's a populist way of saying that.
Any more questions, comments, follow-ups? Let me check so that I don't miss any raised hands. I don't see any. I think we can also conclude our discussion here. It's been, I mean, very, very fruitful and engaging, both the presentation and the Q&A. So I would like to thank Alberta very much for providing us food for thought, and all the audience who participated and debated afterwards. Let me just say that this is the last session for the present semester of our Tuesday seminar series. There are more to come in the next year, hopefully, but we don't have any plans yet. So we will be in touch. So thanks again, everybody, and Alberta in particular. And see you next time. Goodbye.
Many thanks. Bye. Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Bye-bye.
And
Thank
a Happy
you.
New Year for those who are believers.
Talking about religion, yeah.
Right.
Ciao. Ciao Alberto.
Bye. Ciao.
Ciao.
Grazie.